My co-host is zooming around on a stranger's motorcycle?
The Horse Race is brought to you by Benchmark Strategies, Boston's leading public affairs and public relations consulting firm. To learn more, connect with Benchmark on LinkedIn at Benchmark Strategies or visit benchmark-strategies.com.
Welcome back to The Horse Race, your weekly look at politics, policy, and elections in Massachusetts. I'm Jennifer Smith, reporter for Commonwealth Beacon, here with Steve Koczela, president of the MassInc Polling Group, and it's Thursday, August 28th. In today's episode, we're taking a hard look at whether automatic voter registration is making Democrats' woes look actually worse than they are. And then at the end, we take a spin through some of the wild and truly weird submissions you all entered for the new Massachusetts state flag, seal, and motto. So for the past 2 weeks, I have not been here. I have been honeymooning in places with working trains. And obviously that has been tragic for Steve. But today we are reunited. Technically we are reunited, but we are still thousands of miles away from each other, but we are reunited via Zoom. Steve, I am here in the bunker. Where are you?
Yes, I have actually been recording for the last few weeks from Kenya, which, as those who follow me on Instagram or Facebook know, is where I'm actually living for the year. So we got here in early August, and I've been recording this here podcast from our East African Bureau of the Horse Race ever since.
That's a little bit further away than Western Massachusetts, if I can read maps correctly.
Yes, just slightly further. But you did mention in the intro working trains, and you and I have been having some hilarious conversations about the state of transit in the places we've been visiting. So, Jenn, transit, Paris. From what I gather, the trains come regularly. They rarely catch on fire. So what was the transit actually like where you were?
I am just literally gripping my face because the caveat, as soon as I returned to Boston, the red line worked for me. It has worked for me for 2 whole days and it hasn't messed up yet. So, stick with it, because for the 2 weeks before that, I had the frankly blissful experience of, let's say, getting on a train in Switzerland and looking at when it's going to be arriving, and we have to catch another train in Switzerland, but there's only 4 minutes in between when my train arrives and the other train leaves. And here in Massachusetts, or in many places in the States, we go, oh, babe, you're going to miss that train. Like, you are not going to make that connection. And so the way my mind was blown by just, oh yeah, the systems coordinate what the drop-off tracks are with the pickup tracks. So you get off the train, you walk 30 feet at maximum, and you get onto the train right across from you. And I have not yet met anyone that can manage to take 4 minutes to walk 15 feet onto a train. So I'm sad to be back.
That is wild. And I remember I lived in Switzerland, these many years ago now, back in the 90s. And even back then, they had countdown timers on bus routes that went down to the second. So you knew, like, my bus is going to get here in 1 minute and 22 seconds. And that's exactly when it would get there.
It was crazy.
Yeah, Switzerland is a marvel. Here in Nairobi, transit is also kind of cool and interesting, but is completely different and mostly consists of basically one of two things. One is a matatu, which are these buses of varying sizes which just hurtle around the city at just breathtaking speeds, weaving through traffic, stopping for the most briefest of instants to pick people up, let people get off and so forth, and then just like whizzing on through traffic, middle of the road, fine, on the shoulder, whatever it takes to get there on time.
Is this public transit, or are these just lunatics with cars?
They are privately owned, but they do run fixed routes and all the time and that sort of thing. So they sort of function as public transit. And the cool thing about them is that because they come constantly and they're ubiquitous, lots of people take them. So they have the effect of actually being pretty good public transit that will get you anywhere as fast as one might get there, I might add, and coming pretty often. So that's one way. And then the other way is Uber is everywhere, including Uber, where you can actually get on the back of someone's motorcycle and weave through traffic to also get there as fast as you possibly can. So just wild transportation options available.
Literally the way my body seized and I went, my co-host is zooming around on a stranger's motorcycle.
I have not ridden the motorcycle Uber. I've ridden other Ubers, but not the motorcycle Uber. But that is just one of the most,
Oh, thank goodness.
it's just an extremely common way that people get around. And delivery is like instantaneous. Like you order something, it's there in like 30 or 40 minutes, because there's so many people on motorcycles all the time ready to deliver people or goods literally anywhere.
So the thing that reminds me of is actually, do you remember the kind of much laughed about proposal from Lyft a few years ago where they were saying, oh, not only will we have a cheaper option, but you can grab a Lyft at these various preset points around the region. And everybody looked at that and said, you are describing buses. You are talking about buses.
Right. And the thing is, like, if you want to do a bus, great. Just say Lyft. We're Lyft. We're going to do a private bus, But they were like,
exactly.
Look at this thing we've invented, And it's like, sir, that's a bus.
Yeah. Yes. And so this, what you're describing sounds like if you were just honest about what it is. This is a private transportation service that runs these sort of predetermined routes as quickly as light can travel.
That's a pretty good description of it, yes.
That's so crazy. I mean, the one other thing that I'd want to mention about the train system, because I was out there, I was thinking about the MBTA, as I always do pathologically. And so when we were in Paris, they have, like London does, like Massachusetts does on the MBTA system now, they have the little, you can just tap your card or tap your phone and do kind of a single payment for a single route. And I noticed in Paris, I was sitting there tapping my card to do little routes here and there and going, is this cheaper than it is in Massachusetts? And yet kind of everything is running more smoothly. I know where all the trains are. I'm not getting alerts. Again, no fires to my knowledge. The only delayed train we had in 2 weeks was because there was an unfortunate incident where someone was hit by a train. But aside from that, everything ran well. And so I, of course, did a little bit of research into how do you actually pay for these systems then? If it's a little bit cheaper to basically cover an even broader distance. And of course, some of these places include zone models that might feel familiar to commuter rail riders, but overall, it was more affordable on an individual level. And the answer is that Paris and kind of the broader region around Paris has a payroll tax basically for employers and businesses within this urban region where you do actually pay into the systems that you want to encourage dependence on. And so that just seemed very interesting to me, where this payroll tax in the Paris metro region essentially pays for 40% of its public transit funding. And we don't have very much of that in the States. There's not very much of that sort of thing internationally. And apparently when it got brought up in San Francisco just last year, it was essentially voted down by the business community. So just an interesting little tour of both international transit systems and also how the heck they pay for them.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, we've got the dedicated portion of the sales tax, but famously, everybody in the state pays that. That's not just like people or businesses who benefit from the tea who pay that. So interesting differences. Nairobi, Paris, Boston, we've ridden all of them, and we will bring you any other transit systems that we happen to ride in our analysis thereof.
As soon as you start riding a giraffe around Kenya, please let me know. I want a GoPro on your forehead.
If that happens, Jen, you'll be the first to know.
Last week, the New York Times released a surprising chart. This was a graphic that showed the declining number of Democrats registered around the country. The graph showed that state by state, registered Democrats were on the decline and registered Republicans were on the rise. And as you'd imagine, pearls are being clutched, eyes are darting around. I mean, the country is full of red arrows and declining blue ones. But seriously, as always, what does this actually tell us? It's a lot more complicated. So just to start, Steve, what was this chart and how did the New York Times create this chart?
Yeah, so there are some states in America where you don't register with any party at all. You just register to vote, and you can vote for whoever you want in whichever primaries you want and so forth. But then in several dozen states, you do, when you register to vote or at some other period, say, I want to be registered as a Democrat or registered as a Republican. And basically what this does then is you can go to that state, look at their registration data, and see, are Democrats going up in the percentage of the voters in the state, or are they going down? And basically the New York Times did that for all of the states where voter registration is a thing, and then used it to create this map, which went viral and caused lots of pearl clutching, as you correctly noted, Jen, that basically showed in all of the states where we have voter registration, Democratic registrations are down, and in most of them, Republican registrations are up or at least even.
So, what was your first thought when you saw this? Because we're going to zoom in on Massachusetts, but you see a chart like that. You're someone who thinks a lot about party alignment. How do you measure party alignment? What does it mean for kind of policy changes in voting? You see all of the red arrows going up, all the blue arrows going down, and it's basically across the entire country. So, how did that strike you just as an initial image?
Well, it certainly is easy to see why this chart concerned so many people and drew so much discussion, particularly among Democratic strategists and Democratic leaders, where it looks like their party has just completely gone off a cliff. And right here, sort of near the top, we should say that, Donald Trump won and Kamala Harris lost. So certainly there's plenty of evidence, this graphic included, that Democrats did have a problem over the last few years. The thing I think that we also need to think about is what else might be behind this graphic, because the most obvious reaction would be, oh my gosh, people hate Democrats, everybody's switching over to Republicans. Wow, look at Massachusetts. Even in Massachusetts, Democrats have gone off a cliff, Republicans are holding steady. Even here, the brand has a problem. Like that's, if you just look at the graphic and kind of take the most surface level analysis, like that is the thing that would appear to be the case.
Yeah, it also reminded me of the chart that we talked about after the 2024 election with the arrows in shifts, basically, of who voted for a Republican president, who voted for a Democratic president, and that you saw in Massachusetts, in which Donald Trump still didn't win the counties specifically, but it was a lot of very dramatic red lines. And so it's been interesting to me that we've had this sort of trend of having difficulty talking about what it means when there is a shift that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an entire sea change. So that was the first thing that came to mind there, was this map looks very familiar to me.
Yeah, and to be sure, Democrats didn't have a great year in 2024. Like, that's not a mystery to anybody, I don't think. And, parties in power didn't have a great year anywhere on the planet, really, looking at 2024. So, I don't mean with anything we're about to say about Massachusetts to discount the fact that Democrats lost and Republicans won.
100%.
That clearly is what happened. But there are mechanical reasons why some of the shifts that are shown on this map took place. And that's, for our probably 99% of listeners who are in Massachusetts, myself perhaps being the 1% who's not in Massachusetts, but, I'll be the one dot in Nairobi on our, Spotify analytics. But for most of our Massachusetts listeners who look at this map and are like, oh my gosh, what is happening to Democrats in our fair Commonwealth? There's an answer to that.
All right. Well, you set it up. What is the answer, Steve? Tell me the things.
Right. So the answer, cutting straight to the chase after 10 minutes of warm up, is automatic voter registration, which essentially is, in the past, you had to either register to vote on purpose or at least go to the RMV and check a few boxes and that sort of thing. Now, since 2020, if you go to the RMV or if you go interact with several other places throughout state government, you're automatically registered to vote, and you're automatically registered to vote as an independent. So we're seeing this big spike in enrollments, and nearly everybody who's a new voter is unenrolled. So, you look at your 18 to 20-year-olds who have just registered in the last, couple of years, pretty much since the AVR law took effect, and you've got over 90% of them are registered unenrolled. So the short version is there's been a change in the mechanics of how you register, and that has meant way more unenrolled voters, fewer Democrats, of whom there were a lot, a little bit fewer Republicans, of whom there were few, and that is the answer to the equation of why we saw this big down blue arrow.
So I think, just to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly, it's that before the automatic voter registration system sort of went into place, to be registered meant that you had to kind of take an affirmative step. You were saying, I am registering to vote, and often, this is the party that I am most affiliated with. Of course, Massachusetts has always had a good amount of unenrolled people, but the idea was it's less likely that you're just going to say, yeah, I'd like to vote, but I have no strong preferences about which party I'm affiliated with. But having a system where voter preference is just not considered at all makes it look like there are fewer people who have an affiliation of any sort with a party.
Correct. Since 2020, you can't opt out. Like you can't say, no, I don't want to register, and you can't, you're automatically put in as unenrolled. There's not a box or anything on the form that you can check. Basically, there's a little note that says you can contact your, your city hall or your town hall or whatever and change your voter registration. But come on, like in the course of your daily life, when does that rise to the top of your priority list? So basically what that's meant is that the percentage of people registered with either party has gone way down. And because there were more of them, the percentage registered as Democrats has gone down further. So when you look, all that adds up to when you look at the map, you see this huge down arrow in Massachusetts that makes it look like, wow, Democrats are in real trouble here. When in fact, it's just because the trend toward being unenrolled has been accelerated by this legal change.
And so, what is the size of the change that we're looking at here? We've got three-ish, a little bit less than 3 years of data. Does it look like it's fallen right off a cliff, or is it more of a shift?
Yeah, it's fallen off a cliff, and it will continue to accelerate downward as objects in free fall do, I think. I do have to note here that Secretary of State Bill Galvin's office has improved how they're putting out party registration now, where it used to just be PDFs, and now they put out machine-readable data. And that just warms my nerdy little heart. So to whoever within the Secretary's office made that decision, you have my very sincere thank you. So looking at how the numbers have shifted based on the latest voter registration data, the percentage registered as Democrats has gone down 7 percentage points since the law took effect, which is a huge number when the percentage who are registered as Democrats just before it took effect was 33%. It's now 26%. So how much acceleration is that? The last 7-point change took 25 years to take effect. We've been seeing party enrollment data change very slowly, even glacially over time. But since the automatic voter registration law took effect, it's really hyper accelerated. So I think that's just going to continue too, because one of the things that kind of holds it back a little bit is that people who were already registered with the party are still around. They move to a new town, their registration may come with them if they go to vote and just update their address or whatever. But as we're just adding new people who have moved to the state or turned 18 or anything like that, they're just all going to be unenrolled, or the very, very vast majority will be unenrolled.
And is this in conversation with a dynamic that we've talked about in the past, which is that U.S. political party identification has also shifted? There are more people that sort of say they're independents rather than affiliated with any particular political party. But then, as you and I have talked about in the past, when you ask them if they lean toward any political party, it starts to look like normal partisan splits.
I think perhaps in a small way, but I think more of what's happening in Massachusetts just with registration is literally just the mechanics have changed. It really isn't indicative of that they feel less affiliated with the party. I mean, I think in many ways people do also feel less affiliated with the party. And we might see incremental changes if people were still having to choose and a few more were choosing unenrolled. But the sort of like off a cliff numbers that Democratic registrations have seen, I think has more to do with just the fact that you can't register as a Democrat. Like it's very difficult to do so. I do wonder a little bit if Democratic leaders are eventually going to be like, wait a minute, we control all the levers of power. Why don't we make it easier for people to join our party? But for the moment, it's just, it's not the way it is. And you end up with these big downward arrows that make Democrats think that people are abandoning the party.
And it does seem interesting to me, too, because in Massachusetts, there's really not, a downside or a consequence to being unenrolled. You can vote in the way that you would like to, with the party preference that you would like to. So it almost seems like the issue is from a measurement perspective of trying to understand how voters are feeling about political parties. Is there more enthusiasm for Republican candidates in Massachusetts, or is there less enthusiasm for Democratic candidates in Massachusetts? It seems like it's almost delaying the ability to judge that until after there's been an election or some sort of more focused polling about how do you associate. Does that seem right?
Yeah, for definitely starting with the first thing you said, I think is right on. There's just no benefit at the moment, other than maybe a indicator that this is how you feel or this is how you identify. It's like joining a club in some way, but with no benefit. There's no membership benefits to this club. Like
Like all clubs.
you can vote in either party primary. You can, actually, I think now you can even participate in caucuses if, you really want to get into the arcane processes of, of the Democratic Party in Massachusetts. So it doesn't really give you anything in that sense to like take that step to go and actually register with a party. It does make polling a little more difficult because we used to be able to say, yes, we're sure we have the right number of Democrats and the right number of Republicans because we have weighted it to the party registration data and so forth, and this is what it is. But now that you've got the vast majority being unenrolled with more and more every day, it just is a much less precise way of, fixing your poll results to represent the actual population. And then the second thing you said, this was always a good source of data that we could lay alongside of what people were saying about how they felt. This was like an actual action that they'd taken, like a box that they had checked, rather than like them responding to a question which we had formed or something like that. We still will have, do you think of yourself as a Democrat or Republican, and see that go up and down. We'll see the generic House ballot, which Democrats have taken quite a large lead in recently, and other kind of political dynamics like that. But this was always like a piece of administrative data, which was just true. Like you knew exactly how many people were registered with each party. And now that information is just kind of much less precise and will only get less precise over time.
And as a journalist, one thing that this brings up for me, at least, is that it's always a little bit difficult when you're looking at a specific state that you know very well. So we can say, hey, we know what this means in Massachusetts to some extent. We understand the idiosyncrasies of these changes to party registration and voter registration. But then it gets a little bit difficult because, of course, every state can have its voting idiosyncrasies. And so I think for me, it feels like a little bit of a split brain where you're saying, I can explain pretty clearly what's happening here in Massachusetts, but what does it mean if you're seeing similar trends all across the country, in which not every state is instating these automatic voter registration rules, and yet you're still seeing these swings? And so I think I think that's something that I might have to turn over in my head a little bit more, which is, what do you do when you say, well, this seems anomalous locally, but it's clearly also part of a trend nationally?
Yes, I think that's a very fair way to look at it. And I think just glancing around at some of the other states, I think that would actually require a state by state look to see where else might it be anomalous, and once we kind of subtract out all the anomalies, like how much is left? Because I think it's pretty clear there is something left. Like you would have this kind of shift anyway. It's just, would some of the arrows be smaller? Would some of them maybe be flipped slightly? I think is a good question. Like one, nearby example is in New Hampshire. You can go in and change your registration on the day of the primary and cast your ballot in that primary if you're undeclared, which is what independent is called up there. So that's another one where there was no Democratic primary, there was a Republican primary. So you'd have a lot of unenrolled voters going in and, changing to being Republican, for example. So those are the kinds of dynamics which I don't know all, 20 or 30 states across the country and how exactly they treat all those things. But it seems like some treatment of that, rather than just oh my gosh, everybody hates Democrats, everybody's leaving the party. If you're the New York Times, it feels like you should take the next step and just see, but also what else could explain this in some states, and how much would we be left if we kind of netted all that out?
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting point because looking at the maps, it not only kind of shows down arrows for Democratic voter enrollment, but also plenty of states that sort of see small drops in Republican enrollment or kind of stagnant voter enrollment from Republicans. They're, pretty red states that either saw really big swings up for Republican enrollment or, like Utah, where I went to high school, or California, where I grew up. You have these very small kind of tweaks up in terms of Republican enrollment, and same in Massachusetts. And so, what that kind of makes me wonder is, oh, does this tell us something about kind of the basic capacity that was already being captured in those states as well? If we already had a strong understanding of maybe what the identification with the Republican Party is in those states, that means it moves a little bit less. So all of this is very fascinating. So I look forward to checking in with you and making you explain charts to me as much as humanly possible.
Well, I like nothing better than talking about charts. And as we've said many times in this podcast, listeners love nothing better than describing charts in an audio medium. It's like the best possible thing to do in a podcast.
Well, Steve, we're going to see how they feel about us describing what a flag looks like because we will be right back with that.
I'm Zainab Asma-Doyle, Research Director at the Massing Polling Group. The Massing Polling Group serves the region's leading foundations, political groups, government entities, and businesses. Our surveys and focus groups bring high-quality data to the toughest questions facing society today. Learn more at massingpolling.com.
And that brings us to our final segment, which this week is brought to you by what is by far our biggest department, and that, of course, is the Department of Official State Stuff. This week, we return to the great state of Massachusetts state flag public submissions. Jenn, these all came out this week. There are at least hundreds, if not thousands of them, and some of them are just absolutely spectacular.
I love this. This makes me so happy. This makes me as happy as readily available voter registration data makes you by, I think, a very narrow margin. You might beat me out on this. So the state, as I'm sure people are aware, has been trying to reconsider what the seal and flag looks like. It has been a subject of great controversy for quite some time because of the way that it uses a native figure in the middle of it. And above this native figure is an arm with a sword. And that, coupled with the state motto, has led plenty of people to say maybe we could give this one a rethink. So in an effort to say, well, what might that in fact look like, the state asked for and it received 1,165 submissions. That's 997 for a new flag, 377 for a new seal, and 407 motto submissions. And they have released the whole submission list online. I want to know how many of these actually have Duncan involved. That's the data that I want available because quick scan, crazy town.
I was going to say that seems like a bit of data viz that the good folks over at Commonwealth Beacon could undertake as an act of service journalism. But some of the truly hilarious ones do have Duncan, like the new state dinosaur running along carrying a Duncan cup. Like that one is truly deranged.
Yeah, we've got some, Maura Healey leaning over a Dunkin' Donuts with heart-shaped glasses while some frat bros clash solo cups in the foreground. I mean, some of these are very wild. I do want a very specific shout out to the one that kind of threw all of us for a loop on first, second, and third viewing, which is perhaps a humpback whale on a black background with laser eyes with, I think, cranberries off to the side. Am I describing that correctly? Because I was so flummoxed.
Yeah, there's really no, there's no verbal explanation for what a lot of these actually are. It's just an image. And it does look for all the world like a laser-wielding whale shooting cranberries with a green laser. And why not? I guess that seems like some good Massachusetts stuff. We've got science, we've got oceans, we've got cranberries. Why not?
I think on a very basic level, that's rad and we should lean into it.
We've also got lots on fish, lots on cod. We've got, I don't really know what this one is even. What's the one with the shadowy guy with a roast beef sandwich and a turtle? What is that? What's even being shown there?
I think this is connection points between different regional specialties, because that looks to me like a bar pizza somewhere
Maybe
on this. And we got a
that's
sea
it. You got
turtle.
it. Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's like,
This is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely incredible stuff. Check out all the images, which we can't possibly do justice to on any of the Massachusetts media websites. There's also some great motto options, which are a bit easier to describe here in this here audio format. So, Jen, what were some of your favorites?
Yes. So again, just to say, our current one is "By the sword we seek peace, but only peace under liberty." And one of the proposals to replace that is just "In COD we trust."
In COD we trust. We've got "This land is hostile to tyrants, the gateway to New Hampshire." I have to think that was maybe Scott Brown's submission. We have "Where Republicans go to become Democrats." And then "Which free since 1693." That's another good one.
And then the very simple, very to the point, just "Wicked."
Anyway, fortunately for all of you, that is all the time we have for today. I'm Steve Koczela, signing off with Jenn Smith. Our producer is Charlie Koczela. You can write to us at thehorseracepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything visual that you would like for us to describe in this audio format. Don't forget to give The Horse Race a review wherever you're hearing us now. Subscribe to Commonwealth Beacon's daily download, and reach out to us here at the Massing Polling Group if you need polls or focus groups done. For now, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.